God, I don't cry that much when I get on a
Keep
roll
on running.
this morning. I just don't stop, you know.
They're so hard to get started. Once you get them started, you want to keep them coming.
Yeah.
I learned
It happened like Christmas. That was the last time I can remember, really.
I didn't think about it, talk about it, because I spent a lot of time on maybe I had.
Yeah.
Spirituality. Today is the all-important topic of spirituality. What I will try to get across is the absolute importance of steps 1, 2, and 3. The ability to turn our life over to a power greater than ourselves. Now, what I find so often the problem with that is not so much the unwillingness to do it, but that we've never had the experience of trusting or counting on someone being there for us. That gets to be the primary spiritual obstacle. So what we need to do then is to invite the people, if they've never had those experiences, to start to build on these treatment experiences as the foundation, the beginning place of where we begin to learn to trust, period, and then build to be able to trust God, power greater than ourselves, the higher power. That's what the agenda today is. Hello, hello.
Hi.
Well, how's it all going today? Good, I hope. You know, every time I come in that door, and over the years I think I've come in there 30,000 times, the first thought I have is how lucky I am to talk to such beautiful people who are winners. And I know from where so many of you sitting in treatment, you think, God, winner. I got committed in here, I've beat my kids, I threw up in a punch bowl 2 days ago and got dumped in here. What are you talking about, a winner? Winner is because we're here to do something about it. And some of you may not exactly be ready right now. You may have doubts. Some of you even denying that there may even be a drinking problem. But we're here, and the opportunity to do something with our life, to get untracked and to get going is so exciting. So whether you can believe it or not, hitchhike on my belief. You're beautiful folks, and you are winners. And it's the neatest thing in the world to be here with some of the other neatest people in the world. Well, what we're going to talk about today and then do some work on is perhaps the most important topic of all of recovery and ongoing recovery, which is spirituality. Hard to talk about in a sense, hard to get a handle on, hard to get a hand on, but I'll tell you, spirituality is the answer. Now, why we're talking about spirituality in basically steps 1, 2, and 3, again, is because, and how many times have you heard this here, we're here to get well and to stay well. And the first step of getting well and staying well is sobriety. There's nothing that takes the place of abstinence. But if we are going to stay abstinent, if our life is going to continue to move into some happiness and some success and some real love, then we must learn to deal with the pain in our life. Chemicals medicate pain. Sooner or later, our program must focus not just on doing without the chemical, but with the pain in our life. And so much of the pain in our life, like we talked about in our sessions on family, on relapse, on anger, it's a matter of forgiveness, forgiving others, forgiving ourselves. It's a matter of accepting what cannot be changed. If there's been abuse, if there's been abandonment, if there's been incest, if there's been hurt, can't be changed. And accepting that rather than fighting it is such an important element in reducing the pain so the chemical's not needed. Then after the acceptance, the moving on, letting go, getting on with our life. And those are all basically spiritual questions. Now, what I mean by spiritual is not religious necessarily. What I mean by spiritual is it's more than just rational. We can understand concepts. We can take notes in program. God knows we talk enough about stuff. We can get our head around a lot of things. But it doesn't mean that inside we can let go. Doesn't mean inside that we forgive. Doesn't necessarily mean that inside we find that serenity. That's spiritual. Something beyond just what we get our hands around. All right, in terms of understanding spirituality, our program teaches, and the core of our program is, without conscious contact with a power greater than ourselves, Nothing happens. Now I know lots of people come into treatment and they absolutely will not, do not, cannot believe there's any such thing as a power greater than themselves. Because of a lot of hurt, because of a lot of pain, a lot of withdrawal into themselves, they just cannot believe there is any power greater than themselves. Any power outside themselves that would care, for one thing, even if there is something out there, doesn't care about me, is not going to give me the power. Inch by inch, and if you can't believe it now, for right now, maybe it's good enough to just say, maybe. For right now, maybe is good enough. Maybe there is a higher power. Maybe it will become safe to turn my life over to the care of God as I understand God to be, not as anybody else does. That's the cornerstone of the program. Without a power greater than ourselves, what's left? See, and what's left is the power that I am. Now, some of us still think we have the power even to take this first step, which is sobriety. Some of us still think we're just in here out of bad luck, or just because somebody else is so damn mean, they put us in here. It's not really a drinking problem that I have. Some of us haven't even accepted that. But accepting that of myself, my own willpower, my own intelligence, my own whatever, until we get beyond saying I can stop it, but I need something greater than myself to reverse this flow. We're stuck, and all we're left with is what we've tried before. And what we tried before hasn't done it. A year ago, there was a gentleman that went through treatment, a guy named Dick, wonderful guy, went on and became a counselor. And I suppose 80% of you, 2 minutes after treatment, are going to want to be counselors. But he went on, and he's a wonderful counselor now. And he came back, and he was telling me that when he was sitting in this chair a year ago, listening to this very talk on spirituality and what we're going to develop and then get into a group about spirituality, he said, I was hearing what you were saying, but there's no way in the world I believe there was a power outside myself. No way I could accept that. Nobody ever has given me any help before. Why would there be such a thing as God that could give it to me before? In the journey that he has taken towards slowly beginning to understand that, it's just beautiful for him to see. And I don't know, maybe we'll get him back here and share with us kind of his journey, but it's been absolutely beautiful. All right, anyway. The first 3 steps of our program, if you break them down, translate it a different way, here's what it says. I can't, he can, or she can. God is spirit. God is every bit as much female as male. And it may especially be important for some of the women here who perhaps have a lot of shame, a lot of guilt to see God as her, not him. There's a lot of women that have never had a healthy relationship with a male. And if in our popular mind God is male, it's always he and him, that in itself becomes an obstacle. So the steps, I can't, he or she can. Step 3 is, I let him, or I let her, I let him do it. Now here's a way to think about that I liked, an analogy that I really like. I used to work at a mental hospital here in the state, and I'll tell you, you get wisdom wherever you can. There was one of the inmates at this mental hospital that shared this with me. He came up after one of the meetings, and we were talking about spirituality. He said, is this kind of the idea? He said, I get the image of an 800-pound rock sitting on my foot. And that 800-pound rock on my foot, not only does it hurt, it keeps me from moving on. He said, it's like there's a party I want to go to. If there's an 800-pound rock on my foot, I can't get next door to the party. And he said, the party's my life. All right? He said, now as long as that 800-pound rock's on my foot, I try to lift it with my own strength. I can't lift 800 pounds. I try to rationalize the rock and say it ain't rock, it's paper mache, but it's still 800 pounds. I can't change it. I tell myself it doesn't really hurt. My foot's crushed, blood's pouring out. It hurts. So I do everything that I can with this 800-pound rock on my foot. Step 1 is saying, I got an 800-pound rock on my foot, and it really hurts. Enough. Step 2 says, and this guy's saying, I look around, and here's 10 guys built like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, they're strong. And that's all step 2 is. He said, is that right? That I look up and I see here's all kinds of guys that got muscles coming out their ears that can lift this rock. It's the best I ever heard step 2 explained. And he said, step 3 simply is I say, hey, you guys, how about lifting the rock? That's it. There's a rock, I can't lift it. I look around and I see all kinds of people who can lift it. Step 2. Step 3 says I ask them and say, hey, will you lift the rock? That's step 1, step 2, step 3. Without conscious contact with the power greater than ourselves, we're stuck. We're absolutely stuck. Why do you have a jack in your car? You get a flat tire, you can't lift that car by yourself. Alcoholism is a flat tire. If you don't have a jack in your car, get it out, pump it up and use it, you can't change the tire. Step 1, step 2, step 3. There is a power greater than myself that inch by inch, if you can't take a step, take a half step. If you can't take a glass of water, take a teaspoon of water. But inch by inch, we get to the point where we can acknowledge there is a power greater than me, that it is safe to turn my life over to that power greater than myself and get the freedom that I'm absolutely, I want. It's what I really want. I don't want to sit with all of this unresolved anger. I don't want to sit here with all of this sense of hopelessness. I want some freedom. That's why we need the power greater than ourselves. That's what the whole thing is about. Now, what is the obstacle with that? If it makes so much sense that if you can't lift the rock, get somebody to help you. If it makes so much sense that I can't change that spare tire by myself unless I have a jack, then what's the problem? Why do we find spirituality, at least some of us, a lot of us, why do we find it so difficult? Well, let me share with you an idea. And then this is what we're going to group on later on. What the program asks us to do is that we came to believe that there was a power greater than ourselves and that we turned our life over to the care of that higher power. The problem that most of us have is that asks for some skills. It asks for some abilities. To be able to believe that there is someone outside of us that cares, that it is safe to turn our life over to that higher power. It asks that we have the skill and the ability to trust, to be vulnerable, to believe that that power will be there on an ongoing level. The problem that most of us have is we've never had that experience. If we've never had the experience of being able to trust and to count on other people and that it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to ask for help, if we've never had that experience, then we cannot have that expectation either. You can't expect what you've never experienced. We only really know what we have experienced. So we come into program damaged, hurt, betrayed, having been hurt most of our life. And all of a sudden, we are supposed to be able to believe that this caring being is out there, this being with enormous, loving power, and that for the first time in our life, maybe at 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, it's safe for the first time to say to this being that I have no idea what it is, take me, I'm yours. I mean, it becomes almost impossible. Now, what we're going to talk about when we start grouping around this, what we're going to get into is, what has been your experience of admitting that you can't do it by yourself? What has been your experience of that? As a kid, when you really needed help and you went and asked for help, what happened? What was the experience of that? What was the experience that you had of trusting, of being able to truly, vulnerably, with a lot of risk, trust somebody else? What has been your experience of that? Therefore, what is your expectation whenever you would do that? And that's what this program says you must do. You must come to believe that there is a power greater than yourself that can restore you to sanity. But see, what is the experience that you've had of that? That's what we're going to talk about in just a bit. Let me just quickly share with you an idea about the last word of the second step, restore us to sanity. You know, a lot of people, we start into treatment and say, sanity, geez, I mean, if I'm not sane, what am I? Well, the opposite of sane is insane. We tend to think, don't call me insane. You think I've never stood on my head in the corner and poured soft drinks up my nose. Don't call, well, maybe some of us did. I don't know. But you know, what's crazy? Well, remember a couple weeks ago when we were sharing, Ron, and you were talking about in drinking, drunk, you were leading a snowmobile line, all kinds of snowmobiles behind you. So damn drunk, you fell off in the snowbank, got back on, you're the first snowmobile in line, thought nobody saw you. Sane? See, that's, how sane are we? You know, I mean, we do things that are not rooted in reality. Go to a party, you get so sick, you throw up in the punch bowl, and the next day you ask your wife, your husband, you think anybody knew I was sick? I mean, how could you not? So, restore us to sanity is no small thing. And the way that happens, again, is that there is a power greater than ourself that does that. The problem is that most of us, many of us, have not had the underlying human experiences that make that possible to do. Now, what I'm going to ask you to do before we get sharing is, if that's true for you, if it's true and you think back and you say, yeah, I don't know trust from eating my shoe. I've never been able to trust anybody. Borrow this experience. Borrow your treatment center experience. If you've had 30 years of never being able to trust or to share or to be vulnerable, understand that the people here, they'll listen to you. They're going to care about you. They care enough to say it again, I didn't really understand what you're talking about. Borrow this treatment center experience. For many people, this experience we have in treatment is their first experience of God. And yeah, maybe they've been to church for all their life and never experienced God. This is the first experience of God. It is safe to be here. It is safe to trust. It is safe to care. Somebody really does care. Borrow on that. Let that become your God for a while until you continue to grow and build a foundation and really discover your own personal higher power. There's a beautiful story I want to relate to you that I think has so much to do with us in treatment and getting going, and it's a famous old story of David and Goliath. I just love that story out of the Bible. I took the time at one point, it says in the Bible how tall Goliath was, and, you know, in so many cubits, and what it came out to is he was about 8.5 foot tall. And they didn't exactly say this in the Bible, but it said he was terrifying, ugly. 8 foot tall and ugly and dangerous. See, and what the scene was is he was part of this group of people, the Philistines, and they were fighting with the chosen people, the Jews. And they were on opposite camps as they played the story out. And every morning they'd send Goliath out there. Now there's a point why I'm telling you the story. 8.5 foot tall, ugly as sin. It said his shield was so heavy it took 2 guys to carry it except Goliath. His sword was some massive thing. And he'd stand there down in this valley looking up at all these people who supposedly believed in God and say, who's going to fight me? If you really believe your God is so damn powerful, send him down here. Come on down here and fight. Day after day, nobody came down and took up the challenge. You know, and when I meditate on that scene, think about this. How many guys you think are up there on that hill saying, yeah, I believe in God, you bet I believe in God. And I'd be down there, except, see, I got this lumbago up here in my shoulder. Boy, and if I didn't have that, I'd be down, put a sword through that guy so damn fast. Can't you just see them up there, scared to death, of course, saying they believe in God? Left my good spear home. Man, if I had my goods, boy, I'd be down there. Wife cooked terrible breakfast, got a little indigestion, by God, or I'd be down there. Well, see, what happened in the story, as you recall, there was a little kid, said he was smooth-cheeked, but didn't even shave yet. He was bringing food to his brothers who were in this army. And again, it's Goliath down here every day saying, come down and fight me if you believe. If you believe your God is stronger than my right arm, send him down here. Nobody would go down. He came into camp bringing his food, and he heard this big loudmouth shouting around. And at that period of his life, he really believed. And this little boy looks around and says, how come you're letting him get away with this? Who's going to go down there and fight him? And all these people are saying, well, God, he's 8.5 foot tall. And look how ugly he is. And nobody can even lift a sword. See, and the point is, David said, well, you're missing the point. The point is, you don't have to beat Goliath. You and God can beat Goliath. They never understood that. Well, he said, I'm going to go down and fight this sucker. Here, little boy, I'm going to go down and fight him. First thing they did is put all kinds of armor on him. You know, said they put on chest plates. He couldn't lift them. And eventually said, see, you're still missing the damn point. You think my defense is in this crummy shield and in this sword. How can that be? The point is, it's not me that's going down there alone. It's me and God that's going down there. And you know the story. Finally, he threw the shield off, got his little slingshot, his shield, went down there. Goliath's laughing at him. He said, this is the best you have to offer, some little whelp, some little boy to come out and fight me? And as the story goes, and again, it's a treatment story. It's absolutely a treatment story. David says, you don't get the point, Goliath. It ain't me you're fighting. You're fighting me and God, and you don't have a chance. Goliath chose him, whip, hit him in the head, died, cut his head off. Who won? See, it was David and Goliath. It was David and God going after this 8-foot monster. Now here's my point. There's not one of us that doesn't have Goliath in our life. And he is 8 foot tall. And he is ugly. And his power is the power of our fear, the power of our shame, the power of our guilt, the power of our doubt. That's his strength. You think you can beat him alone? Give her a shot. We've tried it all our life. Go down there with your shield and your sword. Not going to make it. But when we choose to let God, I can't, he can, so I let him. When we choose to let God go with us to fight the Goliath of alcoholism and all of the underlying character defects that go with us, we win. We win. Again, problem is, so many of us have found it difficult to trust. A friend of mine gave me this, and then we'll get into some sharing in a minute. I think this is the most beautiful little card. It says, Dear loved ones, I'm working on all of your problems. Please stay out of the way. Your friend God. It wasn't David that killed Goliath. It was David and God that killed Goliath. All right, now we can listen to those stories and say, how wonderful, it's like watching a movie. But here comes the problem. Again, the problem is, what is the experience that you have had that therefore the expectation comes from? What is the experience that you've had of knowing that you need help and asking for help? Of knowing that you need to trust and turning your life over? Of believing that this power, somebody could love you and will love you forever. They will always be there for you. What has been your experience of that? Because that gets to be the spiritual question here, the spiritual problem. Hattie, how about you? What has been your experience? As our program says, turn your life over to the care of God. Come to believe that there is a higher power. Have you had an experience of that in your life, that it is safe to trust, that it's safe to care?
No. In the beginning of my life, I didn't feel that I could trust man.
Especially men?
Women either.
Men or women. Just don't trust anybody, right?
No.
Yeah. Did you ever have the experience that somebody was there that you could really count on who was really for Hattie? Not for what Hattie could do for them, but was there because they saw your inner beauty and they really cared about you for who you were? Did you have that experience?
Not growing up.
Yeah. So then what does it feel like when I stand up here and I say to you, Hattie, the quality of your life and maybe the very existence of your life is going to depend on your willingness to trust and to turn your life over to the care of a being outside yourself. How does that feel?
Scary.
Scary. Scary. That gets to be the problem. Ron, how about you? What experiences are you trying to build a spirituality on?
Well, I guess going back to the beginning when I was a young child, I never felt safe being vulnerable, and to ask for help was opening myself up to a lot of hurt.
Like what? What happened?
I
What
remember
happened when
one
you asked
time,
for help?
there was always work in my family.
Always work.
When I got home from school, there was always a job. I remember for 2 years we lived in Sacramento, and I had to dig a drainage ditch 200 feet behind the house. And I was only 12 years old. And every day my dad came home from work and measured off how much I dug. And it was never enough.
Never enough, yeah.
And I was only 12, about 60 pounds soaking wet, and couldn't dig what he thought I should be able to.
Mhm.
So it was never good enough, so how could I ask for help?
Yeah, that's
You
right.
know, every time
That's
my
right.
daddy said, well, if I cried, if you don't stop crying, I'll give you something to cry
Give you
about.
something to cry about.
And so I guess I never trusted anybody. I guess I had to do it all myself, and I couldn't trust. Every time I trusted somebody, I got hurt.
Yeah.
And then I married a woman that I couldn't show anything other than being Mr. Macho. That's what she expected of me, and I mean, I couldn't feel because she made me feel horrible whenever I told her how I felt.
Mhm. So when I stand up here, or when the program, because that's really important, the program stands up here and says, Ron, it's safe to trust. There is an authority, a power out there that's greater than you, that isn't going to say, you didn't dig this ditch far enough, and then holler like hell at you. How does that feel?
Well, it feels good today because I've been in treatment for a week.
Yeah.
And what got me here was an experience that I'll never forget.
What?
I was starting to feel the powerlessness that alcohol had over me. And my marriage was at the point where my wife was involved with another man. And it hurt so bad. And I just wanted to end it. And I had dreams every night. Vivid dreams. And what really scared me about those dreams was I felt peace when I dreamt the dreams. I really wanted to end it. And I said to myself, I'm never going to drink again in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And that next morning, the first thing I did was pour a drink.
Yeah.
I could not help myself. I was sitting on the couch crying my eyes out and saying, what am I going to do? And what really struck me was it was a sin to kill myself. And so I got down on my knees and I prayed and I surrendered. And I felt God.
So you've had an experience of God coming in your
Yes.
life.
And I had all the answers. And 3 days later, I checked myself in here.
That's great. When you say, you had all the answers come down to be one answer, which is what?
It was I couldn't fix anything until I fixed me.
And what does it take to fix you? Who can fix you? You and God. I mean, there's that big old Goliath right in your path.
And the neat thing was I never have questioned it.
That's beautiful. It's beautiful. Well, that's why, again, Ron, later on in program, we're going to talk about relapse. And why I'm saying that is old David, as a kid, he went down there and killed Goliath, but later on he lost it. Remember the old David and Bathsheba? Wonderful that you have it. Whether you keep it is a question of how tight we work our program. But we'll get into that in the talk on relapse. But wonderful that you've had that experience. Wonderful. Okay, one last comment here, and then we'll go next door and get into group and start actually doing some work. Treatment is a time of miracles. Now, you may hate it, you may not want to be here. Ron's been here a week, some of you less, some of you more, but it's a time when miracles happen. If you're sitting there listening to me talk, and inside what you're really thinking is, I don't believe this. There may be a higher power for Walt or for Willard or for Joanne, but not for me. I cannot believe that there is a loving, benevolent power greater than me that's going to care about me. What I want to ask you to do with all of my heart, tonight when you're laying in bed and the lights are out and nobody's there but you, take a risk. Be willing to take a risk that maybe somebody is there. maybe for the first time in 15 years, dare to invite God to touch your heart. You don't have to group it. You don't have to talk about it in group. You don't have to journal it. Just in the quiet sanctity of your own heart and your own spirit, be willing to try to take a risk tonight and ask God to come into your life. I can't. He, she can. So I let him. I let him lift that rock off of my foot so I can have some freedom. Spirituality is the answer. Okay, in terms of some ongoing questions that we can look at following up on this, I think it's important that we discuss and share, why is spirituality important? And again, like we talked about, the answer, as Ron shared, but the answer to so many of our treatment questions about forgiveness, about acceptance, about moving on, they're spiritual. It takes spirituality. It takes letting go. It takes reaching out to have that power greater than ourselves. Is there a higher power for you, Willard, for you, Kathy, for you, Ron? Is there a higher power for you? And I'm going to ask you to be really honest about that. Don't lie to me. Don't tell me what you think I want to hear. I want to know your truth. For you, is there a power greater than yourself? We're going to talk about, how much have you ever learned to trust in the past in your life? Because it's a matter of trust. It's a matter of reaching out and taking a risk. What have you ever learned about trust in your life? Who is God for you? As you again, we try to work on this third step, turning our life over to the care of God as we understand. Who is that God for you? For some of us, we're going to get back and talk a lot about what you learned in religion. That maybe you come here into treatment with a lot of garbage from religion. And not that all religion is garbage, but maybe part of what you learned is God is vindictive, God is mean, God hurts, God punishes. That isn't God. Most people's God is their dad with a God mask on. And to start working a real good spiritual program, we need to take that mask off and relate to God as God is, not just our experiences of authority or some higher power. And the last thing we're going to talk about, the last thing I have on my list, you have other things on your list that we'll get to, but who is your Goliath? If God is for the sake of helping us kill Goliath, who is Goliath for you? And again, for all of us, the first step of Goliath, it's never taken another drink. But then beyond that, there's other Goliaths. Again, the fear, the shame, the hurt, the worry. What is your Goliath? What are you going to ask this power greater than yourself to help you deal with? It's a lock and a key. We need them both. Okay, last comment, and then we'll go next door and start doing some grouping. It's an old saying you'll hear as you get out and you get in the program, and I think it's so beautiful. If we have one hand in our neighbor's and another hand in God's, we don't have any hands left to take a drink with. True. Okay, let's go next door. We'll take a break, stretch your legs, and then we'll start grouping about, again, what our experiences have been that we're trying to build this ability to share and trust on. So great, let's get up and move around, and then we'll go next door and get into some work.